Good afternoon. Thanks for joining me. My name is Alexander Habel. I will be completing my final assignment for Busy 343 at Liberty University, and today we'll be taking the role of a local grievance chairperson. And this is for case 4, question 2. Let's go ahead and get started. First and foremost, let's go through some case overview here. Our case today centers on Jim Norbuck, who was a longtime employee who was previously laid off due to company-wide layoffs, nothing to do with his performance, and later rehired by his company, Leach Industries. Several months after he returned, the company had discovered that he had misrepresented his educational background on his job application. He had lied about having a college degree. The company did not hire those with college degrees for this role, which he did have a college degree. Instead of investigating or discussing the matter with the union, as required by the CBA, which we'll get into in a moment, the company fired him straight away, right into termination. They cited concealment as the reason for termination, concealment of his job education status. From the union's perspective, this discharge was improper for 3 key reasons. It violates Articles 8 and 11 of the Collective Bargaining Agreement, or CBA. The termination lacked just cause, and the company failed to follow the required disciplinary processes, denying Norbuck his contractual rights. This kind of sets the stage for our presentation. So what will we be doing? Introduction and role. I will be taking the role of the Local 55's Grievance Committee Chairperson. I'm going to demonstrate the dismissal of Mr. Norbuck was a violation of the CBA. We're going to focus on seniority protections. We're going to focus on a lack of cause. And we're also going to focus on some contractual and procedural violations that occurred. We're also going to focus on and cite some scholarly research and arbitration principles. We found some great documents that kind of go through how these arbitration processes go. And we're obviously going to use that to support our argument here. So let's move on to the next slide. Here are some of the relevant contract provisions in the CBA. Article 8 has to do with discipline. Before any discipline can occur, the company must discuss the matter with the shop steward or the grievance committee. This is a core due process protection. We found an article, Bogan, or a relevant scholarly source, Bogan Marburn from Maruli. They'll explain when employers bypass these procedural steps, arbitrators frequently view this disciplinary process, the termination, as lacking just cause. Article 11 concerns seniority. Once the probation period ends, which is 30 days in this case, employees gain seniority protection, and they can only be disciplined for just cause. We found another citation there, Bognano, found that arbitrators often treat seniority as a mitigating factor, which basically means they will reduce or overturn discharge penalties for those who have seniority and are long serving. Finally, we're also going to take a look at Article 12. It affirms the management's right to discipline, but it only affirms it in accordance with the contract. We found another article there, Highcock, I don't know how to pronounce that, but arbitrators look for substantive fairness and procedural fairness, right? So that means they want to know the reason for the discipline and how the discipline is carried out. If one of those elements is missing, the discharge can be vulnerable in an arbitration process. Again, I think that there are some definitely cases here where management certainly did not follow these, and this is what we'll be going into today. So let's move on to the next slide. First and foremost, the lack of just cause. This is one of the clearest weaknesses in the company's case. It fails to meet the just cause standard required by the CBA. Norbuck had no performance problems. He was by all accounts a productive employee. He was rehired after the company-wide layoffs, and he worked without issue for several months. The company waited months after hiring him and rehiring him to act on this information. This delay suggests that they might have been aware of this. They hadn't, or they at worst or at best they were negligible. They were negligent. I'm sorry, not negligible. There was no timely response. They didn't conduct an investigation. They simply found this out. They terminated him. No notice, no discussion, no measures, no nothing like that. Finally, the timing, right? He was also getting more and more involved with a union involved. He was writing papers with the union as they were negotiating their CBA. He was someone that was of note. That's how the HR department originally found out about his involvement and originally found out that he was a college-educated individual. And this really gives some concerns about the motive. Phillips here notes that employers must justify their termination. They must have fair cause. They must follow proper procedures. Again, we believe that they were not following these proper procedures in this case. Let's move on to slide 6 here. Procedural violations. So beyond our assertions that they lack just cause, the company also violates the disciplinary procedures laid out for in their CBA and their due process expectations. There was no prior discussion with the shop steward, which we see in Article 8. There was no investigation or interview that was carried out before the discharge. He simply was terminated. There was no union representation. There was no union representation present throughout the duration of the process. In a union environment like this process here at an industrial plant like this, that's a major issue. You have to have the union involved. And finally, again, citing our Bogenfarber and Morelli here, they explain some of these investigations, right? And we look at with the arbitrators, right? When we see arbitrators in cases that are similar to this, they often just overturn these disciplinary measures when these basic procedural steps are disregarded or skipped, which in this case they were. We believe it's also in Raphael here, another citation that we have. But when they skip these processes, arbitrators often vote in favor of overturning these disciplinary projects or reducing them, even if there was real misconduct, which there was in this case. He was college educated. He didn't lie about that. Finally, on the next on slide 7. Another critical weakness that we see with the company here is the timeliness. The company waited months after hiring Norbuck to act on this alleged misrepresentation. During that time, he had worked productively. He had no issues, right? Delay in this arbitration matters. When an employer disciplines for something that it knew about or should have known about, arbitrators often rule in favor of the employee. Right, there was delay, subsequent termination when he engaged with the union activities. It just undermines the fairness that needs to be present in this process. Right, they could have known about this. They should have known about this. They should have done their due diligence. They chose not to. And then when they found out about it, when they had a reason to find out about it because he was involved in union activities, they went ahead and terminated him with no due process. Right, and the arbitrators again are going to expect prompt action. They're going to expect the employers to have known about this. Slide 8 here. Another key point in the union argument is seniority, right? Seniority matters. He had a track record in seniority at Leach. He also had a positive work record, was a productive employee. Article 11 offers protections for those senior employees. Discipline, especially when considering senior employees, it must reflect just cause. Seniority is often a mitigating factor in these decisions, right? It's not like he'd worked here for 25 days and was still in their probation period. When arbitrators take a look at this in the process, they'll often reduce or overturn termination for these long tenured employees. We see this again cited here. Again, reinforces an argument for a reinstatement. So our proposed remedy, and this is what we propose to the arbitrator, we believe that the union should seek to fully reinstate Mr. Norbuck. We believe he should be fully restored to his seniority. He should not be at probationary pay anymore. He should have all those benefits. He should have back pay for that time that he missed and he was terminated. He should be paid for his time there. And if the arbitrator does argue that some sort of punishment is appropriate, we believe that putting Mr. Norbuck under a last chance agreement and reinstating him would be fair. We believe there's precedent for this, and we feel confident in this achievement. Finally, we have our references here. Really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you so much for your work this semester. And we think this is a really good resolution to this case. Thanks again. Bye-bye.